And good afternoon. Actually, to be correct, good morning or good evening, regarding on where you are tuning in from. Welcome to another episode of the Physical AI powered by Digital, where we have the pleasure to take moments with the brilliant minds and share their really knowledge bombs, all focused on one thing, on how machines and human behavior converge into space. And today I have the pleasure to have Benjamin Busam with us. Benjamin, what a pleasure. How are you?
Great, great. Thanks for the invite, Tommaso. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, the pleasure is all mine. Where are you tuning in for here for our audience?
So I'm tuning in from Munich, Germany. So for me, it's already later that day. Still looking forward. It's gonna finalize my day really brilliantly. Thank you.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. Yeah, and tuning in from beautiful, beautiful Munich. So allow me here, Benjamin. By the way, you go with Benjamin or with Ben?
Ben is good.
Ben is awesome. All right. Who is Ben? Who is Benjamin Busam? Ben is professor at the TU Munich, which is the Technische Universität München, Technical University of Munich, and leading voice in computer vision, known for pioneering work in visual localization and 6D pose estimation. Really looking forward to chat with you about that. He bridges classical geometry with modern learning to build physically grounded world models, powering persistent spatial understanding for navigation and embodied AI. He's published extensively at the classical CVPR, ICCV, CCV, shipping benchmark and research direction in localization and mapping. Ben, you're ready to dive into your topic of 60 and beyond.
Ready and quite excited. Yeah. So
Right
our
on,
world
right
is
on.
3D. So let's talk about this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I know that obviously our audience is primarily professors, assistant professors, and PhDs, but also a series of executives, right? And whomever is focused on this topic or reads about the topic of physical AI, that now early 2026, where we are recording this, everyone has understood that what the LLM has created as a solid fundament is now also merging and moving very quickly and importantly in combination with so-called large world models, right, and 3D and 4D tokens, right? But you are approaching another term that is called 6D. Maybe for the audience here, what is 6D, Ben?
Sure, sure. So our world is 3D, right? And objects in our world, they do have, if they are rigid, they have 6 degrees of freedom typically. So that's their location in space. So if you are in the X, Y, or Z direction located, and the other 3 degrees are their orientation along those axes. So whether a certain object is rotated this way, that way, or rotated along this axis. And this is super important for embodied AI because if an embodiment, a robot, for instance, wants to grasp or interact with a physical model or a physical object in space, it needs not just to know where it is in space, but also how it is rotated.
Absolutely, very very important. Where space becomes fundamentally important in its specific location, especially if you want to do something that is safe, that is accurate, right? And for machines to learn it, we need that accuracy, right? So when we talk about 6D posing, right? When does it become actually physical AI, right? So we're saying, perception, which moves towards world models, but when does it really become physical AI, Ben?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So for a large time in our field in computer vision, the things were handcrafted, right? So we had very specific 3D replicas of models. For instance, if you think about automation in industry, the classical case is you have a 3D model in your computer and you want to interact with it after it has been produced. Think about a construction line, think about a conveyor belt where you want to grasp objects. And classically, those objects, they have their simulated model, and then you find the simulated model in the environment. So it's a very sort of hand-constrained, handcrafted pipeline. And And we are seeing in this field, which is very, very exciting, we are seeing that those kind of handcrafted models where you have one very classical, for instance, mesh or a point cloud, they become more and more implicit. So the explicit forms of having models, of having replicas of our environment or simulation reconstruction, they become more and more implicit, such that they're reasoning about what to do with it in terms of grasping, in terms of manipulating, in terms of sticking things together. It's not something where we think the pipeline needs to be designed in modules, but the models reason about this more and more by themselves, by being trained. And I think this movement from classical handcrafted pipelines towards more and more, nowadays, you mentioned already transformers in your intro, more and more tokenized reasonings about our environment is where we see physical AI going, I think.
You mentioned a couple of use cases. Is there anything that is compelling and more recent that you want to share here with our audience that you have crossed where this applies?
Yeah, sure. So one thing is 3D reconstruction. So in our group, we are focusing on photogrammetry and remote sensing. So that's basically a core task where we want to build in silico replica of our environment, which are bases for simulations, which are bases to tell an embodiment such that it can reason about it and act safely within that environment. And so this safety critical component is basically necessary to be put inside of our simulators. And a classical case would be I go around with a camera and get an understanding of our environment in terms of a point cloud, which is basically a representation typically of the geometry, might be also assigning some colors. And then the fields sort of have evolved over the past years, where instead of just having pure geometry on one end, we also care about photorealism. And there was one very famous work about neural radiance fields, and now radiance fields in general, that instead of reasoning in terms of point clouds or in terms of mesh models about our environment, we store the information of our environment volumetrically in the weights of a neural network. And based on this, this shifts the focus and the capacity of the networks towards what's really relevant to downstream tasks, because we can now sort of represent even entire 3D scenes in the weights of a neural network and then tune them, for instance, through a fully differentiable pipeline towards what they are useful for in terms of downstream application. And while this is a movement that in the first place looks less interpretable, it is more focused on what it can actually do for a specific task. And now, interestingly, in the past years, especially when it comes to explainability, people have investigated a lot to make these models explicit, or then also understandable and reason about what's going on when they are used for robotics, to, for instance, simulate visually what the robot does before it actually does it. And these kind of capabilities are now also put in our pipelines for specifically for safety reasons.
That's very compelling. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Ben. So the robotics industry, right, and mapping, right, has traditionally more emphasized metrics accuracy and physical correctness, right? But at the other hand, we are seeing also a big push towards the classical neural rendering and Gaussian and the newer Gaussian splatting, right? So which reality is, let's say, more tangible or matters more, creates more value for the actual quote unquote intelligence, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think both have their advantages and also their drawbacks. And it really is depending on the downstream application.
Okay.
For some downstream application, especially if an embodiment needs to interact with the environment, the main key component is to understand what geometry does around its environment. Think about a car, for instance. If a car drives around a city autonomously, even on a high autonomy level, it really doesn't matter whether the cars around the autonomously driving car are blue, green, red, yellow, you name it. But the car must not bump into one of those. So the geometry is much more important for this kind of task than the appearance. However, we as humans, we do have eyes, and the eyes perceive passively our environment. So we only reason with the passive perception of an image or two images about our environment. And in such a way, the human is really, really used to images, and because they are easy to understand. And images, if they come from sparse data, for instance, such as a point cloud, they don't look realistic. So if we want to interface with a human, show something about a 3D scene, a 3D environment, or a simulation, then it is much more of importance that it looks photorealistic, because this is intuitive to understand even for non-technical experts. And then depending on this task, whether you are more, let's say, on the side of where physical correctness is important, about actions and safety of robots, you would go more to geometry. Or if you want to go more towards photorealism, where the digital twin creates you maybe some data to train large models, then you are aiming for these models to be as realistically looking as possible.
Yeah, I love this topic because I mean, the job to be done is the core and the fundamental decision here in which direction and what direction to apply, right? So contextual aware environments, right, are creating totally new business models beyond just embodied AI, right, or machine, like drone autonomous vehicles, right, and any form of robots, right? I mean, there are the scenarios in which robots interact to complete a job, right? And then geometry absolutely is core, right? But I can see fundamentally maybe even a bigger use case, which is now this new species, right, that lives with the human being species, right, needs to have an intelligence that goes beyond just the understanding of what comes next within an action, right, and needs to be contextual aware, right, semantically aware, right. So and so the mix eventually, even of both intelligence, right, create then ultimately the true, do we want to call it mature intelligence, right, without using the word general intelligence, right?
Yeah, that's true. I think in this aspect, it's even more important to explain what certain embodiments do. We live in this exciting time where things are automized more and more, right? We see autonomously driving cars, and maybe less in Europe than in the US actually, or in China. But we do explore this, and at the same time, we have this very manually steered cars, pedestrians walking around, where it's of utmost importance to understand what is the next action. And then in industry, think about the next coming years, which are exciting times where we will undergo a transformation away from manual labor to a collaborative environment where robots will naturally interact with humans. And in terms of this interaction, it's very important to understand what next actions of the embodiment are. This has safety, but also acceptable reasons. Because if you understand your collaborator, your embodied AI collaborator, as an entity that's actually doing reasonable, explainable things, then it's much easier to interact with it. And within that environment, simulations and photorealistic simulations, for instance, you can think of a screen of the robot showing what it does as a next step. A human will definitely understand this if it comes with photos or video data generated while or speaking with you. while a more, let's say, abstract formulation or a more abstract representation might be more difficult to interpret.
Yeah, I think we will be seeing truly a deployment in phases, like everything that we have seen also in the past, right? And right now, we are tangibly approaching, any form of embodied AI to serve humanity and to complete a job in a safe, rapid, optimal, efficient way, right? These are very linear tasks that humanity doesn't want to do, or can no longer do, or shouldn't be doing when it comes to safety. But I'm really compelled to see the mature evolution of this coexistence of embodied AI human being, right, in a world in which we are eventually in 3-4 years, 5 years time, kind of already getting used to, beyond the early adopter curve, right? And with the early adopter curve, I'm really curious to understand. I mean, it kind of shifting a bit but kind of also interested to understand how the cognitive muscles of humanity is evolving, if not declining, right? And how then the robot is interacting for this possible gap, lack, right, of what the human being is presenting. Really, really interesting, right? So you start out with, hey, you help me out, and you do it correctly, and you need to know geometry or contextuality, but at the same time you see a human evolution that very curious to see where this goes, right?
This is crazy, right? We live in a time where such a big breakthrough that can be anticipated will be in the lifespan within our lifespan to be recognized and
It is
actually
amazing.
lived in. This is super exciting to me, and I think it's crazy, and I compare it a little bit in terms of the accessibility of information that came with the smartphone that is broadly available now and used by many people. Now while this was an access or a gate to a lot of information at our fingertips, now we have helpers at our fingertips that even more intuitively communicate with us and are actually physically present. So we have basically moved from a fully virtual digital assistant, if we call the smartphone like this, to something that's embodied and can also assist us in the real world. And it's quite exciting to design this to solve the whole problems, both on the industry, academic, also on the social side that come with it.
Huge. I mean, this is the I think for the very first time, technology and innovation, as what we have understood as technology as innovation so far, is being redefined, right? Because if you think along the lines of what you're saying, like if you think that technology has always needed the full support of the human energy to be complete, like a bike, it doesn't work on its own if you don't pedal, right? So there is a human and always combined with the actual tool, and in order for that to work, you need the power of the humanity, right? A hammer, right? Also the technology, same thing. You need to hold it in a certain position, right? You need to have the experience as a human being to basically hammer it, right? And the power of the human being, the force of the human, right? Now for the very first time, we have entire problems that can be solved end to end, right? And so this shift, the shift of responsibility, right? On one hand, you can list a series of benefits, right? And on the other hand, right, we are really recategorizing, if not decategorizing, right, the relevancy of us as human being, right, on Earth, right? Which means, okay, what is then our role, right? What is our position, right? So not everybody will be mastering AI and embodied AI. Anyhow, these are phenomenal topics here that you're from Munich. We would love to expand upon it while in a beer garden with a nice Weissbier, Benjamin, right?
Maybe served by an embodied AI, by a server that comes on wheels, who knows?
Exactly.
But it's really not trivial if you think of the beer garden, right? Right now we have to solve a lot of problems, and I'm not even mentioning the energy part. But right now, many of the things, they are very much focused on lab environments. While data in 2D and data in the form of text with the World Wide Web is there in an abundance. In 3D, there is much less data publicly available, can be gathered, of course, or can be extracted from 2D, but we don't have this quantity of data. And the problem to move out of very constrained lab environments into an open space where everything can happen, and this starts with all the light changes, but also the different physical entities that need to be understood well in order for robots to interact. This is a really highly non-trivial task. And there are many researchers pushing in that domain, and I'm quite excited also for the computer vision community, actually, that we can see over the past years, in particular with the upcoming interest in neural radiance fields, 3D Gaussian splattings, you mentioned it, but also many more other works, that we are shifting from 2D, which is images, it's not representing our real world, it's a projection, into 3D/4D, if we have the time component in domain, which is much closer to what we really have in our surroundings. So this is quite exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thought and questions that I've prepared here is around closed set versus open collaborative work, open world, right? So we have been seeing lately a shift going from open worlds, right? And this radical departure from this closed set pipelines, right? In contrast to what it was previously, right, is kind of setting a new tone. I was wondering and wanted to pick your brain on this, right? Do you think that now physical AI, right, is ever going to be or can ever be in a certain form a closed set again? What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think to become a reality for the server in the beer garden, that's probably right now easy to be a server in a certain lab where the light is constant. Every day looks the same. It can grasp the beer bottle, maybe even open the lid. That's a big step. And I think we need the simulators we have right now, which are largely driven by classical methods, also being adapting to industry. And we see many pushes also of big companies that are making these simulators to be more and more broadly applicable to general scenes, being more photorealistic, having all those components in while being accessible to researchers all around the globe. And I think this endeavor is necessary. So if you ask whether physical AI goes back to closed set, I don't think so, because it's in our interest that those machines work in everyday scenarios. And I'm thinking about a vacuum cleaner going around, but I'm thinking about cars moving around, which we see right now, but there is much more to be explored. And our world is not easy. The light is not fully controllable all around. The weather, all those outside factors and all the moving entities within our environment, they are not following the constraints. So we need to follow the trend, which the language community has been witnessed over the past years, to move from very constrained setups now also into setups that are as natural as our everyday life. And it's a matter of data, but it's also a matter of systems. And the systems need to integrate 3D perception around the capability of manipulating in silico replica of the environment as easy as possible with text, such that they are accessible to a wider audience. And then using these simulators to let a robot act within that environment. But before actually acting, being capable of simulating it safely in silico is, I think, the key.
And do you think this is going to happen in silo/industry-specific data sets, or how do you envision this right now, Benjamin? Because obviously, if you create a vision in which all industry open up data, right, which in an ideal world makes totally sense from a value proposition, right? But from a bottom-up perspective of reality, how do you envision that possibly happening, Ben?
That's a very good question. I think similar to the question about geometry versus photorealism, we have a spectrum here.
Right.
If you think about the way currently certain parts are manufactured, think about the car. So I'm in Munich here. If I have a look into a car manufacturing sites, I will see a conveyor belt with very clearly defined steps. And within that that environment, there are machines that do exactly one task. And those machines might have robotic arms to always grasp a certain object with a 2-point gripper, with a 5-point gripper, maybe with some suction cups. And for those machines to fully function, it's not important whether this machine can mow the grass in the garden. It will never do it. It has been designed for a very specific, clearly defined tasks. And I think this will still be there because it's relatively controllable what will happen. The machine uses one purpose, and it's never going to be exposed outside of this controlled environment. But then there is a lot of other machines, thinking about drones, cars, everything that moves around our real world that has sensors on board. Those kind of embodied AI systems, they need the capability to act in a much less constrained open world setup. And then within that spectrum, I think we will see all of this. And the very clearly defined tasks on a conveyor belt to put things together that are priorly known, I don't think that they will change first. But the ones where the environment is most dynamic and changing, those require to be working in an open world because we can't constrain the environment.
So it is kind of category specific plus it's the equation category specific plus the actual setup of the machine that will determine open versus closed data set, right? Awesome. Ben, what's maybe to wrap up things, what's the one thing you are the most excited about when it comes to this topic over the next 2-3 years? And maybe the other version of that would be, or the other extreme is, what's the biggest challenge that you see to get there?
Software is easy, hardware is hard.
All right.
And I think moving from perception, where we use sensor data, may it be images, may it be depth sensor data in terms of 3D, 2.5D perception, and to reason about whether something is a cat, dog, pedestrian, you name the downstream application, is something that can be done in silico. Moving hardware through an environment has many more interdependencies, and there we often can't wait for a very long time. So need to be very focused, have constrained resources, and I think moving from software into the hardware domain might sound very close, but there will be significant obstacles we have to carry out. And this is the era where the perception people that are currently focusing on computer vision domains and research on image processing now sort of combined forces with natural language people, machine learning experts. They now need to open up interchange with the robotics community. And the excitement I have about this is the field becomes more and more interdisciplinary. And that requires a whole new skill set also for our students, for our next generation experts to be taught. And it's a lot of fun to learn these new communities, but I think this will also pose us the biggest challenges.
Yeah, I love it. Ben, how can our audience know more about what you're doing? How can they follow you?
Sure. We are reachable at the main computer vision, also robotics conferences. Most people of the team will be presenting their works there. So if you're interested in those domains, check out our papers. Feel free to always reach out to us. You'll find us on the TUM website. We can also send that link, and feel free to reach out via email and then get connected. I'm very, very excited to talk with you, Tommaso. This was
outstanding, cool. Outstanding, Ben. Speaking of conferences, April 23rd, feel free to scan the code. Physical AI Symposium in Palo Alto. We'll have a mix between on-premise and remote for the academics world, primarily. Obviously, some industry also part of it. April 23rd, Silicon Valley. If you're close by, stop and let's have a coffee. Thank you so much, Ben. I really loved it, and I guess I'll see you in the metaphysical world with more and more embodied AI, right? Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.